Hello and welcome to another story with Boo. This week's story comes from Scandinavia and the story comes from out in the countryside where they have houses that have turf roofs that got grass growing on top of them. And I thought this was quite a good story for lockdown because I think there's a lot of us that initially thought that working from home was going to be an easy option. And maybe as this story shows, it's not always as relaxed and just about drinking coffee that some people may think it is. Anyway, let's begin. This story comes from a time when the men worked out in the fields and the women worked at home. Now on this particular day, the husband has just returned from a heavy day's work in the field, and as normal, when he sits down to eat his evening meal that's been prepared for him by his wife, he moans and he grumbles about how he's got the harder deal, how he has to work harder, and how his wife has it so easy because she can just laze around at home. And on this particular day, the wife has had enough. "Fine, husband," she says. "Tomorrow I will go and work in the fields, and you can be the one to stay at home and mind the house and do the chores." "Great," said the husband, already smirking to himself and already looking forward to his day of leisure that lay ahead of him. The following morning, when the wife got up, she put the scythe over her shoulder and went off to go and cut hay out in the fields and left her husband at home. And her husband thought, right, so what shall I do first? I know, I'll churn the milk to make some cream. So he starts churning and churning and churning and churning. Whew, my goodness, he said, this is quite heavy work, it's quite hot. I know what I'll do. I'll go down into the cellar and I'll pour myself a nice cup of ale. And that's what he does. He goes down into the cellar, he finds the barrel of ale, and just as he's turning the tap, and just as he's putting his cup underneath, he hears a noise from upstairs in the cottage. A crashing and a banging and some strange grunting noises. Oh no! He quickly runs upstairs. He'd forgotten to shut the back door, and the pig had got into the cottage, and of course the pig, smelling the cream, had knocked over the pail and there was cream all over the floor, and she was having a lovely time grunting and runting in the spilt cream. The husband quickly shooed her out, gone out, and closed the door, and then remembered that he hadn't turned off the tap, and ran downstairs into the cellar, quickly turned off the tap, but by now there is ale all out across the cellar floor. Oh dear, he said. Oh well, what is done is done. And he goes back upstairs and decides that he will start grinding some oatmeal for their lunchtime porridge. He's grinding away and grinding away, and he's doing quite well. He's making pretty good progress. He's feeling quite pleased with himself until he hears a noise from outside, a bashing and a banging. Something or someone wasn't very happy. Oh no, he'd forgotten to let the cow out of her stall. And as he's going out to go and let her out, he suddenly thinks, actually, it's too late now to walk her all the way down to the grassy paddock. I know what I'll do is I'll cut her some grass and I'll feed it to her in the stall. And then he has an even better idea. I know, he says, why waste my time and energy cutting grass when there's grass growing on the roof of my cottage? So what he does, he gets some pieces of wood, he goes round to the back of the cottage where there is a bank, and he places the wood from the bank at the back of the cottage up onto the roof. And with much gentle persuasion and pulling and pushing, he eventually gets the cow onto the roof of the cottage, where she happily munches away at the grass. The husband's feeling very pleased with himself now. He thinks that maybe she might fall off the roof, so to stop her doing that, he ties a long rope to her halter and passes it down the chimney all the way down into the cottage, where he thinks that what he'll do, he'll tie it around his ankle so he'll know if she's moving around. He then goes back down into the cottage, but oh no, he'd forgotten to shut the back door again, and all the chickens had got in and had turned over the bowl that had the oatmeal in it and were scratching around on the floor. So now there was cream all over the floor, and now there was oatmeal all over the floor. Oh well, he said, what is done is done. He then realised that the sun was high in the sky, and it wouldn't be long before his wife came home for lunch, and still nothing had been prepared. So quickly, as fast as he could, he ground up some more oatmeal and put it into a pot to start cooking their lunchtime porridge. And he lit the fire. And of course the smoke went up the chimney, frightened the cow that was on the roof, who gave a jump, fell off the roof, and as she fell off the roof, the rope that was attached to her halter went up and down the chimney and around the husband's ankle, and suddenly the husband was pulled up the chimney. Fortunately, by this time, the wife had been working very hard in the fields and was getting a little bit tired of waiting for her husband to call her and say that lunch was ready. So she started to come back of her own accord. And of course, as she approached the cottage, she could see the cow dangling off the roof. She quickly ran over and with her scythe, shunk, cut the rope. And the cow, boom, fell to the floor. But of course, as the cow, boom, fell to the floor, inside her husband, crash, bang, wallop, fell into the pan of porridge. There were screams and cries, and the wife went running into the cottage, and there, all over the floor, was spilt cream, there was spilt oatmeal, there was the smell of ale coming up from the cellar, and there was her husband upside down with his head in the bowl of porridge. She quickly pulled him out and righted him up the right way, and looked at him as porridge dripped down his face and dripped off his clothes onto the floor. Husband, she said, from now on, you do your work and I will do my work, and we will say nothing more about it. And that's what they did. And that's what they carried on doing. And that is the end of that story.